Well, people, this is it. This is the bottom of the barrel. The show to end all shows. You can give me any other wrestling event you can think of. WrestleMania 9, Bash at the Beach 2000, December to Dismember. None of them can possibly compare with the absolute pile of donkey dung that was this. In 1988, with the NWA heading downhill, all the biggest independent promotions decided to team up and take one last vindictive swipe at Vince McMahon and the behemoth he was creating from the Northeast. This coalition was led by our old buddies in Dallas with World Class Wrestling and the American Wrestling Association, which, despite seeing Vince plunder its roster 5 years earlier, was still chugging along on the back of Jerry the King Lawler, about the only guy outside the two big boys who could draw a packed house. The two promotions had joined forces to create the Superclash event back when World Class was still connected to the NWA. But this time, they would also bring in Jerry Jarrett's Championship Wrestling Association and the women's promotion Powerful Women of Wrestling. And the plans were set to host the third Superclash event in December 1988 from Chicago. Oh boy. Yeah, let's just say the Windy City doesn't have an outstanding history of hosting wrestling. Remember, this was the site for WrestleMania 13. A show whose main event was thrown into chaos due to Shawn Michaels losing his smile 2 months prior, and whose only saving grace was the famous I Quit match between Bret Hart and Steve Austin. Heck, the first Superclash was held at the old Comiskey Park. And while it drew a decent 20,000, the NWA and AWA reportedly disputed over just how much money was made, leading to the NWA pulling wrestlers who were scheduled to appear at AWA events. That's probably why there wasn't another Superclash until after World Class left the NWA. When they chose to return to Chicago for the third event in '88, though, it wouldn't be at the vaunted home of the White Sox. Nor would they be at Chicago Stadium or the famous Rosemont Arena. Nope, they would perform at the vaunted Pavilion on the campus of the University of Illinois, Chicago. Geez, not even DePaul wanted anything to do with the AWA at this point. The place could hold up to 9,500 for wrestling and boxing events. Did this event come close to that many people? Oh, we'll get there, people. For now, here's the main event of Superclash 3. The main event was a title-for-title unification match between the AWA champion Jerry Lawler and the World Class champion Kerry Von Erich. This clash of titans was hyped as saying there absolutely would be a winner. Now, why would they need to say that? Oh, maybe because these two had already fought about a half dozen times where there was no winner. Bear with me here, because it looks like there were at least 3 to 4 times these two faced off before December, and it was really hard to go back and find out when each match happened. One such match took place, I believe, in Nashville, and actually aired on ESPN. That one ended with Kerry getting disqualified for using an illegal hold, and Lawler claiming he should get Kerry's belt because in World Class, you could lose your title on a DQ. Only for Kerry to point out his hold wouldn't be illegal in World Class. Another match took place at the Sportatorium for World Class TV, and that one ended in a double DQ with both wrestlers stripped of their belts, and I have yet to see when and where they both got them back. I always thought the Nashville ESPN match came first, but WWE's website says that one took place on October 1st of '88, while I read that the Sportatorium match took place on September 24th. I seem to recall there was another match after both of those taking place at the Cotton Bowl. If I got any of this wrong, feel free to let me know, but try to cut me some slack. Man, who knew that researching the pre-internet history of a rigged sport run by carnies and conmen could be so damn difficult? So here it is, the main event of the biggest independent super show ever put on, to finally decide out who the man outside the WWF or NWA was. And who would finally come out on top between this clash of independent champions? Well, guess what? Not even the ones involved in this point knew at that point! Seriously, the story is that with just minutes to go before both men were to get in the ring, no one had decided on a finish! 3 to 6 months of false finishes leading up to this, and still neither side was willing to put the other one over. They supposedly settled on a bleeding finish, you know, like back at Wrestling Star Wars that worked out so well. But even that got messed up, because in the locker room discussion, Kerry, who may have already dipped into his special stash at that point, looked to scratch an itch on his arm, forgetting he had already taped a blade to his finger for the match and slashed himself open right there. So now they had to come up with a reason for why Kerry would be bleeding right from the start. This is among the multiple reasons why I would have no problem whatsoever if wrestlers just went full-time to blood packets. Now, for what it's worth, once they got that out of the way, what immediately followed turned out to be a halfway decent match. There is a lot of back and forth action between these two. And the fact that it was going on while Kerry was already bleeding just kinda made it better. And I'm someone who's never really liked excessive bleeding in wrestling. Not only that, but remember, Kerry by this time was working on a prosthetic leg, since he'd had his foot amputated following a motorcycle crash more than 2 years earlier that the family did a surprising job keeping secret for years after. But, as the old saying goes, it's not how you start, it's how you finish. And how did this one end?
These guys are a mess. Marty Miller trying to explain that Von Erich.
The referee stops the match. The referee stops the match. Kerry Von Erich unable to go on. He cannot perform, cannot see. The referee awards the match to Jerry the King Lawler.
Yes! They actually took the ending from 6 years later at Reunion Arena and found a way to make it worse. And then Kerry Von Erich, the supposed clean-cut, honest Captain America of professional wrestling, marches out with both belts after the referee had declared that Lawler had won them both. And you all thought Hogan was a bad loser, crying about getting screwed over by the Hebner clone against Andre the Giant.
The rules simply were no disqualification. There must be a winner. The referee, for Kerry Von Erich's own safety, stopped the match.
Translation? We said there would be a winner, but neither side agreed to lose, so we had to pull something out of our butts. If you didn't realize wrestling was staged after this, you must have had your own head up your own butt! If I had to sum up this match, it might be like my buddy Rowdy talking about the Quantum Leap finale. Everything was great right up until the end. That's right, even with how they had to start the match to cover for Kerry's bleeding stupidity, much of this match was very intense and action-packed. And it could have been a match of the year or even decade material. But that finish completely took the air out of everything. That match could have salvaged the whole show, and instead it solidified it as maybe the biggest turd in wrestling history. And you want to know the absolute topper of this? The match and the result mattered nothing in the long run, and both sides knew it before they even went on! Just days before the show was to take place, Fritz von Erich had agreed to sell his promotion to Jerry Jarrett and Jerry Lawler in a deal where Lawler would leave the AWA and become Jarrett's new champion. So consider this. Fritz had already agreed to a deal where Lawler was going to end up the champion regardless of what happened on camera at this Super Show, and he still wouldn't allow his boy Kerry to get beat clean under any circumstance. I mean, is it better or worse that he was supposedly trying to protect his kid as opposed to someone like Hulk Hogan always being out for himself? Making matters even worse for all sides, Lawler has always claimed he was never paid for working the show, which was why he never returned the AWA belt to Vern Gagne even after he left town. It was a complete and total disaster, as less than 1,700 people showed up, and the promoters didn't even bother to black out empty sections or move people over to the soft camera side, so it just made things look even worse on video. The AWA did last long enough to hold one last Superclash show. And yeah, Vern's son Greg Gagne has claimed they were going to bounce back with a huge TV deal from WGN, which would have given them enough money to lure Hogan back. And it supposedly only fell through because the Tribune Company cut costs after their news writers went on strike. But excuse me if I find myself believing that very much. I've wanted to talk about this event for a long time, and I apologize if I didn't get everything accurate because the old sources I read on this years ago have been lost to the burial ground of the web. But this was the epitome of how this industry has always been victim to egos and bad ideas, even without Vincent Kennedy McMahon's fingerprints on them. Professional wrestling can be one of the most glorious things to watch if the audience accepts that it's more like a Broadway show than an actual sporting event, and if those participating can shelve their egos and work together for the great of the show. The problem is that wrestling has always been run by people who want to script and control everything like a television production, but who also have egos like actual competitive athletes who always want to be on top. And too often, compromises have to be made to sate egos the size of Jupiter that result in a show ending in a way that leaves the fans outraged and no one winning in the end. It happened in '82 with Christmas Star Wars, it happened in '85 with Starrcade, and it definitely happened with Superclash 3. So, yes, you can be happy that Vince McMahon is no longer with wrestling, and maybe that will be for the better. But at least take the time to appreciate that a company like WWE still has people in charge that make it clear that they are in charge, that they have a vision, and that they will enforce what they intend to do. And that maybe that other company down in Jacksonville should finally take some pointers and actually have some enforcement going on. See you guys next time whenever I get to do this show again, maybe in another 3 years.